The laughter stopped Claire Miller the moment she stepped out of her car. It wasn't loud. It wasn't wild. It was calm, familiar, and painfully out of place. The sound floated through the open window of the house across the driveway, the house she promised herself she would never return to. Her ex-husband's house. Claire stood frozen, keys still in her hand, heart suddenly racing. She had told herself this was just a quick stop. Drop off a box of old paperwork Daniel had asked for. No emotions. No memories. No past. But the past had a voice, and she recognized it instantly. Ethan Walker. Daniel's best friend. The man who had been part of her life longer than her marriage had lasted. The man who always seemed to be there without ever being in the way. The man she had tried very hard not to think about since the divorce. Claire took a slow breath and forced her feet to move. She walked toward the house, each step heavier than the last. The front door was open, just like it always used to be on weekends. For a moment, she felt like she was stepping into a life that no longer belonged to her. Daniel looked up when he saw her and smiled politely. It was the kind of smile people give strangers they once knew well. "Hey, Claire. Thanks for bringing the box," he said. She handed it over and nodded. "No problem. I just found it while cleaning." The house felt smaller than she remembered. Or maybe she had grown. The walls were bare in places where photos once hung. The couch was different. The air felt neutral, careful, like everyone was afraid to disturb it. Then Ethan turned from the window. Claire's chest tightened. He looked older. Not in a bad way. Just more solid. His hair was slightly shorter. His posture straighter. But his eyes, those hadn't changed. They were still calm, observant, and full of things he never said. "Hi, Claire," Ethan said. Her name sounded softer coming from him, like it had weight. "Hi," she replied, hoping her voice didn't give her away. For a brief second, neither of them moved. Daniel cleared his throat and started flipping through the papers in the box, already distracted. Claire noticed how icily Daniel turned away. He always had. Ethan stepped aside to give her space. "It's been a while." "Yeah," she said. "It has." They talked about small things at first. Safe things work. Traffic. How fast time moved. Daniel mentioned a meeting he had forgotten about and excused himself to take a call in the other room. The moment he left, the room changed. The silence between Claire and Ethan wasn't awkward. It was full. Like something unfinished was finally allowed to breathe. "You look good," Ethan said carefully. "Healthy." Claire smiled, polite but guarded. "I feel better these days. I'm glad," he said. And he meant it. She glanced at him, noticing how he didn't rush to fill the quiet. He never had. Ethan always listened more than he spoke. During her marriage, that had been easy to overlook. Now it felt important. "I didn't expect to see you today," she admitted. "I almost didn't come," Ethan said. "But Daniel asked me to stop by." Claire nodded. Fate had a strange sense of timing. She remembered the early days before the wedding, before the cracks. Ethan had been around then too, always respectful, always one step back. When Daniel joked too loudly, Ethan noticed when Claire grew quiet. When Daniel forgot details, Ethan remembered. At the time, she had thought that was just friendship. Now, standing there years later, she wondered how much she had missed. Daniel returned, phone in hand. "I've got to head out soon," he said. "You don't mind if I keep the box, right?" "Of course not," Claire replied. She didn't plan to stay, but something held her there. Maybe curiosity. Maybe unfinished thoughts. Daniel grabbed his jacket and keys. "You two can lock up when you leave," he said casually, already halfway out the door. The door closed behind him. Claire and Ethan were alone. She felt her heartbeat in her ears. Ethan broke the silence first. "I'm sorry about how everything ended," he said. She studied his face, looking for pity. She found none, only honesty. "Thank you," she said. "It wasn't easy. For anyone." "I know," he replied. Another pause. This one heavier. "I wanted to reach out," Ethan said quietly. "After the divorce. But I didn't think it was my place." Claire nodded. "I probably wouldn't have answered." He smiled slightly. Fair enough. She laughed softly, surprising herself. The sound felt good, real. They talked a little longer about life changes, about moving on. Nothing deep, yet everything felt close to the surface. Claire finally stood. I should go. Ethan walked her to the door. Outside, the sky was turning orange, the kind of sunset that made people think about second chances. Claire, he said before she reached her car. She turned. There's something I've wanted to say for a long time, he added, stopping himself. But maybe not today. Her heart skipped. Okay. She got into her car and closed the door. For a moment, she just sat there, hands on the steering wheel, breathing. Then her phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. I'm glad you came today. There's something I should have told you a long time ago. Claire stared at the screen. Her mind filled in the words he hadn't written. She didn't reply. Not because she didn't care, but because she did. As she drove away, she realized something unsettling and true. Some feelings don't disappear with time. They just wait quietly for the moment when silence is no longer enough. Claire couldn't sleep that night. The moment she closed her eyes, memories of Ethan came back in sharp flashes, the quiet way he listened. The way he noticed when she held back tears, the small kindnesses Daniel never saw. She had tried to bury those thoughts for years, telling herself it didn't matter. That chapter was closed. But it wasn't. Not really. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, but she didn't reach for it. She didn't need to. She already knew. Ethan's words were still there in her mind. There's something I should have told you a long time ago. The next afternoon, she found herself standing outside a small cafe by the river, trying to act casual while her heart raced. Neutral ground. No past walls, no old furniture filled with memories. She pushed open the door and saw Ethan immediately. He was early, leaning against the counter, scanning the cafe as if he wasn't sure she would come. When he saw her, he straightened, offering a small, nervous smile. "Thanks for coming," he said, voice low but steady. "Of course," Claire replied, trying to keep her tone casual even though her stomach churned. They chose a corner table where they could talk without interruption. Outside, the river glistened under the afternoon sun, calm and steady, almost like a silent witness to the conversation about to unfold. Ethan didn't waste time with small talk. "I said I had something to tell you," he began. "I never did before, and I regret it. I didn't tell you because I thought staying silent was the right thing. But it wasn't." Claire leaned back, trying to control the rising rush of emotion. I'm listening." "I cared about you," Ethan said, staring at his coffee. "Before Daniel did. Before anyone did. But he was my best friend, and you chose him. So I stepped back. I didn't want to cross a line. I wanted to respect your choice and his. And I thought that was enough. But it never was." Claire felt a lump in her throat. She had known Ethan cared, in some quiet, hidden way. But hearing it aloud was different. Real. Heartbreaking. "Honest, I had no idea," she whispered. "All these years." "I know," he said quickly, shaking his head. "I never expected anything. I needed you to know. Not because I wanted to change the past, but because I couldn't go on pretending it never mattered. You mattered." The words settled between them, heavy but gentle. They didn't touch, didn't hold hands. They didn't need to. The honesty itself was intimacy enough. Claire realized she didn't feel guilt. She didn't feel confusion. She felt clarity. She understood something she had ignored for years. Ethan had always been part of her story, even if he had waited patiently in the background. She stared out the window at the river, letting the sunlight fall on her face. "I'm not the same person I was," she admitted. "And I'm not sure I even recognize the person I used to be with Daniel. But hearing you say that, it changes things. Not immediately. Not in some dramatic way. But it matters. It matters a lot." Ethan looked at her, relief softening his features. "I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly. "Not now, not ever. I just couldn't keep it inside. I needed to be honest. You deserve that." She nodded. blinking back tears she didn't want to show. Thank you. For being honest. For always noticing. For waiting, I guess. He smiled, small and uncertain. I guess waiting is all I ever knew how to do. They talked for hours about small things and life changes, about work, about the quiet moments that often went unnoticed. Every so often, a pause would fall between them, filled with unspoken words that didn't need to be said. It was calm, not tense, warm, not suffocating, respectful, but meaningful. Eventually, they left the cafe and started walking along the riverbank. The water glimmered like liquid silver in the afternoon sun. They walked side by side, not holding hands, not forcing closeness, just walking, just breathing, just being. It was a first step toward something neither of them could define yet. Claire noticed how natural it felt. No pretending, no pressure, no old resentments. Just two people acknowledging what had always been there in some form and seeing if it could exist again. Differently, in the present. I've spent so many years thinking about what I could have done differently, Claire said, glancing at him. About who I could have been. About the choices I made. Ethan shook his head. You can't change the past. None of us can. But the future is ours to choose. Even if it's scary. Even if it's uncertain. Even if we don't have answers yet. She smiled faintly. That's terrifying, but also freeing. Exactly, he said. Freeing. That's what it should feel like. The sun began to dip lower, painting the sky in pinks and golds. People were strolling, jogging, laughing along the river. But Claire and Ethan moved like the world had narrowed down to just them. It was quiet, gentle, honest. It was a connection that didn't need fireworks or grand gestures. It needed honesty. And it had that. At some point, Claire realized she was smiling more than she had in years. Not a forced smile, not a polite one. A real smile. And she realized she was breathing easier. Not from relief alone, but from clarity. The truth, finally spoken, lifted a weight she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. Ethan glanced at her, noticing the change too. You feel lighter, he said. I do, she admitted. Because it's honest. Because I finally know. They paused at a small bench by the river, watching the water move with a quiet, steady rhythm. Neither of them sat down. Neither of them spoke immediately. They just existed in that space, side by side. I don't know what happens next, Claire said softly, and I don't expect to know. Ethan nodded. Me neither. But sometimes it's enough to start here. To start honest. To start knowing the truth. Claire took a deep breath and looked at him. There was no pressure in her gaze. No demand. Only understanding. Only acknowledgement. I think this could be something real, she said, careful with her words. But it has to be slow. We can't rush. Not now. I wouldn't want to, he said. I want it right. Not fast, not reckless. Just right. They walked in silence after that, the river moving alongside them, constant and patient, like the promise of what might come. They didn't know what the future held, and that was okay. They didn't need certainty. Not yet. They only needed honesty. When Claire finally drove home that evening, she felt lighter than she had in years. Not because a romance had bloomed instantly, not because anything dramatic had happened, but because the truth had been spoken, because what had been hidden for so long was finally seen, because Ethan, who had always cared quietly, had finally given her the honesty she deserved. And Claire realized something important. Sometimes love doesn't arrive at the right time. Sometimes it waits patiently in the background. Sometimes it comes too late for the old life, but just in time for a new one. As she pulled into her driveway, she felt a small thrill, not urgency, not guilt, not pressure, but hope. Hope that the story wasn't over. Hope that life, for once, could be honest. Hope that something good could finally grow from what had been quietly waiting all along. Some feelings don't fade. They don't disappear. They wait. They wait for the moment when silence is no longer enough, when truth finally finds its voice. And sometimes, when that moment comes, it's everything you've been waiting for. Claire smiled softly, a quiet promise forming in her heart. Whatever came next, it would be real. And that was more than enough.